Welcome to the Sports Forecasters Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. This podcast has been created not to dwell and over-evaluate what has already happened in the sports world, but to predict and to forecast what has yet to come. From game picks to draft picks, and from trades to free agent signings, we will let you know what happens before it happens. Your hosts, Nick and Nate, will evaluate, study, and understand sports patterns, tendencies, and nuances to better prepare you on what to expect. Just like weathermen, but way more accurate. So if you like to pick games or you simply just want to be in the know before anybody else, you are in the right place. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Sports Forecasters Podcast. I am your host, Nathan. We have our co-host, Nick, and this is where I really love the most about this podcast. We're starting the football season. I apologize I missed last week. Our daughter was just born, so I took the week off, obviously, to be there with my wife and just celebrate the birth of our daughter. So it's good to be back, but I'm excited. I'm going to be in the full sports analyst mode right now. I'm not going to predict games and everything, so I'm very excited about that. Nick, how did you hold the fort down when I was gone?
Well, some careful planning ahead of time. I knew the baby was coming sooner than later. Episodes we have done, I kind of kept in the freezer and just kept rolling them out a little bit at a time. So everything worked out to we were covered. We were unable to record last week, but fortunately everything worked out to where we had everything covered. But we didn't get to what we want to now for this week, where we want to start looking at different parts of games that we want to look at and make picks for. So Nathan, do you want to go into detail what we're going to do for the picks that we're looking at to do?
Yes. So Nick and I are going to have a little competition throughout the football season, and we're going to go back and forth and make picks throughout the year. But I do want to bring up one thing. Even though I was off last week, I did run my algorithm, which I've been perfecting all of COVID. You know, I had the Sports Analyst podcast, as many of you know, and with COVID, I took time off. Because there's no sports, and my son was born, and now I have a daughter born, and so I just kind of took time off. But I didn't lose sight of what I've done so far, and so I used that time to really perfect my algorithm, and I used that for the first time last week for the first slate of games, and so I went all 16 games. I went through and predicted the score. So I had a bet for it against the spread and the over under because I predicted the score of each game. And if I placed the bet on every one of those against the spread and the over-under for all 32 possibilities, two per game, I would have got 25 out of the 32 correct. That's nearly 80% success rate. Now, I have a little bit of a cushion, a safety cushion. So let's say I think it's going to be a 7-point game and a 6.5-point spread. I stay away from those games. So of the 7 that I missed, 4 of those games I wouldn't even looked at because it was just too close to call. So only 28 games, So that means I really went 25 out of 28, which is almost a 90% clip. That's insanely good when you're betting against the spread and the over-unders. So I just want y'all to know, this isn't just some average Joe sports betting podcast. This is for real. Nick does a really good job looking at maybe historical evidence. I look more of this analytics. So his viewpoint, my viewpoint really complement each other. So this is a very serious podcast in regards to sports predictions and sports forecasting, especially in football. We really pride ourselves on what we do, and we're really excited about it. So if you live in a state where you can legally sports bet, subscribe to this podcast because the picks I have are highly successful, and I just want to run down real quick. I bet on 5 games last week, so I had a really high chance of getting all 5 because 25 of the 32 outcomes, were correct. Well, I got all 5. I hit a 3-game parlay and 2 other bets, and I made myself over $200. Now it was fake money because it's not legal yet in Ohio. I'm just kind of using this as practice to get continue to perfect this skill. So when it is legal, I can capitalize on this. Just to put this in perspective, 25 out of 28, that's nearly 90%. So to hit a 3-game parlay, I have a 73% chance to hit a 3-game parlay. So if I did 4 3-game parlays last week, I would have hit 3 out of those 4 3-game parlays. Let's say I put $100 on each of those parlays, I would have profited over $1,600 just on that Sunday. Just putting $100, just putting $400 down. That's a 422% return on investment. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So I'm not messing around. This is legit. I have a very top secret confidential way to do this. I put a lot of time into this. I'm very proud of it. So I will give you my picks. Obviously not going to give you the details behind my picks, but I'll give you my picks, and I'll kind of give you a summary of why.
So the sports challenge Nick and I are doing
if you can sports bet, you gotta listen
every
to this
week we
podcast
pick 6
because
games.
I'm for real.
We start
Nick's
with
for real. This is
a money line, an against the spread, and over
we're
under
for real, man. We're really excited
on any
about
NFL
this,
game on
and,
Sunday, and then we just pick a fourth
like I
game,
said, I
any
pick
game
at a
we
very
want,
high
any betting line
percentage
we
rate.
want.
So I'm not just
And
saying
then
this
we
to
do
brag.
the
I'm
Sunday
saying
night
this for you to
football
follow
game,
us,
and then we do the
listen
Saturday
to
night
us,
football
and-
game for college football.
and have a
So
chance
those
at
are our
some big
bets.
money.
So let's get this
Absolutely.
kick-started, Nick.
For me, like you said, I'm dipping my toe into the kiddie pool side of jumping into this kind of environment, and I'm just going to go with what I'm familiar with, what I feel comfortable with, where my likes are at, and that's history, looking at matchups previously when those aren't available. Try to look at other factors. Don't have a fancy algorithm, but I'll be definitely curious to learn about yours as we go, and just like the listeners, just seeing how much better we can get at this as we move along, because you don't get better if you never try it. Absolutely. So let's go ahead and start with our Saturday night football game, simply because that will be the first one coming up in terms of that. When we were talking about our picks coming into this, neither one of us was touching the Thursday night football game unless you have something to throw into that, Nathan. Neither of us really had anything
So
with
I
that.
got Penn
So we'll just
State
go
at
in
-5,
chronological order
and
for
I
our very
think
first one, which was the
that they
Saturday
easily
night
get this.
game. We
And
have
here's why. Bo
Auburn
Nix,
versus Penn State at Penn
Uh,
State.
He's a
What I'm
quarterback
seeing
that
here
I've seen him
is there's
beat
no real
bad
historical
teams,
data
but
for this
when
one.
he has to
Penn
play great
State
teams,
is one
he
and one against
folds.
Auburn all time.
folds.
Last time they played was
And they haven't really been
2003.
able to beat
And so
big
for
time
this,
schools
there's
under
not
Bo
really
Nix.
there's not that
Now they have to go
historical
to
aspect
Penn
to really
State
look at that.
in the
So
whiteout prime
what's
time.
another thing I looked at? Well,
A
the
team
other
that
thing I
just
looked
beat a
at
good
is
Wisconsin team on the
the
road,
last 6
and they were
games dating back to
underdogs.
last season. Penn State
A
covered
team that has a lot of
what
mojo
the
right now
spread
because
was.
Ohio State just
However,
lost to
I
Oregon,
don't
and
think
I
that
feel like
happens
Penn
this time. I
State
believe
really,
Auburn
if they
ends up
can win
winning
the
it.
Big
I think
Ten,
the offense
they're
is
going to
too
get a
much for Penn
spot in
State
that
to contain.
playoff.
I believe Auburn
They
will
really
win the
control their
game
destiny
with
for
the
that
spread.
playoff
On the
berth.
side
And
I
so
looked
I
at,
think
the
there's
spread was
a
at
chip on the shoulder,
I
and
think
they're going
Auburn
to
ends
make
up
sure they
winning
get this
within
game
that
because to
margin.
go on the road, beat Wisconsin, and then beat Auburn is huge for them. So I think they come out with a vengeance. I think they control this game, and they can win this game by at least a touchdown. So they'll cover that 5-point spread. And just remember, Auburn, Bo Nix, they haven't been playing in front of fans in 2 years. So to go to Penn State in the whiteout, one of the worst places to play, is going to be very, very hard. So my against the spread on Sunday, I'm picking Arizona. They have a 3.5-point spread to Minnesota. Now, this I think, is a steal. Obviously, Tennessee has a pretty weak defense, so they're able to put up a lot of points, but that was in Tennessee. Arizona gets to go off that crazy win home in front of their fans, who they haven't played in front of in a long
team
time.
I really liked what I saw
in the
from
red
them,
zone, which
even
is a
though it
very,
was in a defeat.
very
I know there's no moral victories in
hard
the NFL,
place to win
but this
at
team felt
against
like
a
one,
Minnesota
especially
team
with
where
the
Kirk
division,
Cousins really can't
looking how it
win.
did at the end of last season. In
You know,
the
those
NFC East.
really tough games,
Cowboys have picked
especially
them
on
to
the
win the
road.
division, so
And
I
if
see
they're in
them
prime time, Kirk Cousins is not going to win
making
those
their way
games.
to getting
And
on
I think
track.
Minnesota's a lot like a Tennessee. Heavy
+2.5,
offensively,
so I'm gonna
defensively,
take
they
that
have some
line
issues. So
against the Chargers. It's going to be a
Arizona, I
good
feel like
game.
is
It's
going to
going to be a
face a very
shootout, and I just
similar
think the
style
Cowboys
team.
will be able
Kirk
to.
Cousins, Ryan Tannehill,
It's
very
not a
similar
big
style
gap, but
quarterbacks.
I'm going to go with that pick
And
there.
so I just think Arizona can go into this game with a similar game plan and be able to succeed. So I have them winning definitely by at least a touchdown. So they'll cover that 3.5 points.
Over and under, these kind of picks is where I really like to look at particular games where there's a lot of history to it. So I'm looking at a division rivalry here. I'm actually looking at the Monday night game for this week. I'm looking at the Green Bay Packers, well, the Detroit Lions going to Green Bay. And so the last few seasons, it's been about a
Yeah.
coin flip.
Also,
Right
I'm
now,
going to
the
look
over
at the
under
Cleveland
on the
Houston
side I'm
game.
looking at
So
is
I think
48 and a
Houston
half.
is
The last two games they played each other, they went over that total. And I feel like
I
Green
want
Bay is going to be
I
on a
want to
road
count
of
them
redemption.
out per se.
Yet
like,
last
as
week,
this is
I
going to be a
believe, was
flat
an
out terrible
affirmation.
team. They look
I
really good
believe
against
that
Jacksonville,
was
but
their first
Tyrod
taste of
Taylor's
real
been in this league for a
that
very,
was
very long
their
time.
preseason.
So
They
he's got
didn't come in and
experience. So
treat him
coach,
like
even though he's
that.
the first time
But
head
it's
coach, has
almost
got a
like
lot of
Aaron
NFL
Rodgers had
experience.
no
They got Mark Ingram at
offseason,
running
and
back. So
now
that's why I picked
it's time
them
to
to
get
beat
back up to
Jacksonville
speed.
week one, and
Green
they
Bay's
handled
going
them
to come
pretty
out
well,
with a
a
vengeance.
lot better than I
They
thought they were
know
going to
that
do.
they're going to start losing their
So
position in
I don't
the
think Houston's just going
playoffs
to
potentially, or even making the playoffs. So they
not
need to come
score
out
in
on
this
fire.
game. Cleveland, I
Detroit
think, is going
is
to put up
showing
a
they're going
lot
to put
of
up
points.
points. Dan Campbell's probably the
So I'm going
safest
to do the
coach
over the
in the
48. I think
NFC
Cleveland gets off to a
North
hot start,
besides
especially that they're
Dan
going to have
Campbell's
a
not going
bad
to just
taste in
roll
their mouth
over.
with
He's going to
Kansas
go
City,
out
and they're just
guns
going to
a-blazing.
beat
He's
up
going to
on
try to put
Houston
up a bunch of points.
because
So
of
I'm
that
taking the
loss.
over at 48 and a half
But I
with
think,
Green Bay and
midway through
Detroit
third
on
quarter,
Monday night.
Cleveland's going to have
What do
like
you
a
have, Nathan?
21-point lead, like a 31-10 lead. And I just think Houston's going to put up a couple cheap points towards the end of the game because that's what Baker does. He does it against Kansas City. When there's a big lead, they can't really hold that big lead. The other teams get some cheap points. I think that's what happens here, and you might see Houston actually kind of creep into the maybe the 20s, or low to mid 20s, for their score, and Cleveland will be around the mid 30s. So I think this game will be in the 50s, and I got Cleveland in the Houston game going over.
My underdog for the money line will be the Cincinnati Bengals. I really like what they did.
Yeah, we
Joe
agree
Mixon
here.
looks like he's close to
Previously,
being back
last
to
week, I
form.
had
Joe Burrow
there were 8 underdogs
was
that won. My
looking
algorithm
good in
predicted
terms of
6 of
hitting
those
his
8 to win.
throws, being in sync,
This week I
moving
have
the ball
one
down the
underdog
field,
winning, and that's
albeit they had
Cincinnati.
to do it in overtime
Now,
and did let it
they're
slip
not.
away.
I don't have them
I'm
winning
feeling a lot more
by enough
confident
for me
about
to
where they're
actually
trending
bet
than where
money
the
on
Chicago
this.
Bears are
But
trending,
for the sake
with
of this challenge,
them
I'm
going
gonna
back
say
and forth. And
Cincinnati.
they have Andy Dalton
Chicago's
leading
at
the team,
identity
but
crisis.
I don't feel like they
And I
believe
think
in
this
Andy
is really
Dalton
interesting
leading the
because
team.
Andy
They kind of
Dalton's going
switch
to
back
play
and
for
forth.
Chicago
Their
against
defense
his former
is what
team.
kept them in the game as long as they
And
did
I just
against
think
Los
it's,
Angeles. But ultimately,
Andy
Los Angeles
Dalton's
too
going to
much for them. I'm
struggle.
not saying Cincinnati's anywhere
Kind of
near
that
that
pressure
level.
playing
I just
against
feel
his
more
former
confident
team.
about where Cincinnati's going.
And
I don't
to
love Zach Taylor
Chicago
as a
knowing
coach,
it's like, gosh, if
but I feel like he's
Cincinnati
making better
is
decisions than Matt Nagy is as
Andy
of late.
Dalton's former team
Who
is beating
I
us without Andy
like being
Dalton.
one of
We
those
have Andy
coaches
Dalton. I think it's really going to send a message to
Matt
Matt Nagy.
coach.
It's like
Who do
you
you
got to
have,
put
Nathan?
Justin Fields in. You got to give him this experience. And when you have a plethora of games here that have a very weak pass rush, so beginning with the Cincinnati Bengals, so.
One reason I won't bet on this is because who knows, Justin Fields may start last second for Chicago. Assuming Andy Dalton starts, I'm picking Cincinnati. I don't have super confidence in this, but I'd bet money. But for the sake of this challenge, I'm picking Cincinnati as well.
I'm going to
Yeah,
go
I'm
back
gonna
to
go
where I
with
started
I'm
with
gonna
the
go with
over
the
and
Saints
under
Panthers
with a
game.
division opponent. I'm going to jump to a different division
New
over in the
Orleans on the road,
AFC.
Carolina.
I'm going to look at your beloved
New
AFC
Orleans
East.
beat
I'm going to look
the
at the
Packers
Patriots
pretty
versus
easily, as
Jets.
we know.
I have the over and under on
Obviously,
the
that's
side I was
primarily
on
their
at
defense,
42 and a
but
half.
Jameis Winston
The
looks
last
very, very
8
good.
meetings since
He's second to only Kyler
2017, the
Murray right
Patriots and
now
Jets
after
have
week
only
one
had
in MVP
2
voting, in my
matchups
opinion.
where they've went over
I
42 points.
think he's going to come
They've
out. We got
matched
a
42
division
a time or
opponent
two,
here, so
but
they're going to know him
6
well.
out of those 8 times they have
They're
been
just a
42
way
points
better
or
team.
under. So I'm going to take the under in
And
this matchup.
so you just think week
Bill
one was
Belichick,
actually
he
in
doesn't want Mac
Jacksonville
Jones
wasn't
to get
even
in a
at their home
shootout.
field because of the
He eats rookie
hurricane,
quarterbacks up,
and
usually
they
on
still
their first
handled
time,
Green Bay
historically
very
speaking.
easily.
So I'm going to go with the
Carolina,
under with the
they beat
Patriots
the
and
Jets,
Jets.
but
Just
it wasn't
numbers
pretty.
look good there.
It
8
wasn't pretty at
meetings,
all.
6
So they
times
won
they've
19 to
been
14.
that they've met with each other.
New Orleans
It's been
defense is going to be
42 or
way
less.
better than that New
Sounds
York
like a
Jets
safe bet to me.
defense. And if they can only put 19 up on New York, I just don't see Carolina putting up that many points here. And Jameis Winston, maybe won't be as flawless as in week one. They'll put up well enough points to cover that 3.5 point spread. So I got Kansas City covering the 3.5 point spread. They're on the road to Baltimore. Baltimore's got way too many injuries to overcome. And also Lamar Jackson, Baltimore can't beat Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City. They haven't yet. I think that you got to take that into consideration. I think just Baltimore is going to take a couple steps back this year, as I predicted. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So I just think they're going to start 0-2. I think Kansas City's going to put have a double-digit lead here, probably maybe even a 2-touchdown lead to win this game. So like a 38-24
And our last
kind
item
of
we're going to
game.
look at is the Sunday
Very
night
high
football
scoring.
game, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the
So
Baltimore
I
Ravens
just think
at
they handle this
Baltimore.
well.
The spread says
you're the historian
3.5
here, so like I
in
said, Baltimore's
favor.
Baltimore, Lamar
Negative
hasn't really
3.5
beat
for
Kansas City,
I should say. And
lately,
so,
and
who do you
obviously
have
with all the
winning this
injuries
game?
and just losing to Vegas in Vegas it's very heart wrenching. I just think it's gonna be a tough road for them. Pittsburgh looks good, Cleveland looks good, even Cincinnati looks a little bit better. So I think Baltimore takes a couple steps back and it starts, that journey continues on with this game. Well, that's a wrap on our picks. I hope you take a listen to this. Seriously, consider them. If you can legally bet, We're very
Follow
confident
that
in
up,
this.
I also
You
have to
should
give more
take a look
history
at
to
them
try to
and,
have a little bit more to it.
maybe
I'm also picking
start
Kansas
with
City to do it.
$5.
John
Maybe
Harbaugh has
gain
taken
our
on
trust
Andy Reid.
before
He's
you
1-5
spend a little bit
against
more
him in
money.
6 meetings. The
But
last
like I
couple
said,
that
last
you've
week I went
mentioned, where
25 for
Lamar takes on
32.
Patrick.
I
Patrick
went
has won
25
all
for
those
32,
matchups.
and
It's been an average of
I
7.3
went
points
5
per
for 5
game.
on my bet
So
slip and
definitely
made over
taking
$200
over on
in
that
week 1.
more than
And,
3.5.
I didn't
I
have
don't know about
any
2
data.
touchdowns, but it's
All
definitely
I
going
could
to move
use
over
is only
3.5.
preseason
I'm feeling
data
confident
and
about
last
that.
year's data.
Kansas
So
City going in and winning it.
pretty
Started
confident.
slow against Cleveland.
So
Had
anyways,
some good
Nick,
breaks. Sometimes that's all you
you
need to
looking
win a
forward? I hope
game.
you're looking
This
forward
week
to
they
the
look
week
more
2
on
here,
track to
and
the team that many are hyping them to be, while
more
Baltimore is
football
still
here and
trying
for
to find
many
their
weeks to
identity
come.
after all these injuries, especially at running back position, defensive back. Like, I don't know who they have left on the roster, but they're going to find someone to put out there. But Kansas City is going to win inevitably. I'm just looking forward to seeing week 2 of NFL football to see if we have things trending in a certain direction, or was week 1 an anomaly for some of these teams, such as our Green Bay Packers that we had making a decent playoff run, the Buffalo Bills who bafflingly gave up a second half lead. That's what I'm looking forward to see what trends are going to stay and which ones were apparitions, and we're going to be questioning going into week 3 to see which team is the real version, the week 1 or week 2. But for tonight, you have a bit of information to chew on, things to look at, things to consider, and things to watch for to see how close we nail it or how far off we were. So, with that being said, thank you so much for listening to us tonight. We are the Sports Forecasters. You've been listening to Nathan Singer. I'm Nick Alvarez, and we'll see you next time.